In this presentation, we will enter a purchase order and add a new vendor as well as a new inventory item as we do so. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. Before we go further, let's take a look at the flowchart on the desktop version. So the desktop version here, just to take a look at the flowchart, we're going to be up here in the vendor section. We're going to be entering the purchase order. So just recall that the purchase order doesn't actually have a financial transaction. We haven't received the inventory. We haven't paid for the inventory. And no financial transaction. We're simply requesting the inventory. And then we expect to receive the inventory at some future time along with the bill, at which point we will then record that inventory in the system. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our QuickBooks Online. We've seen the purchase order in the past, so we'll do it a bit more quickly here. We're going to go to the drop down up top. We're going to go to the money going out, and we want to then go down to the send purchase order. Send purchase order. Note the difference in the name. It said send purchase order there. It's simply going to be called a purchase order when you actually open up the form. We're going to enter a new vendor. So we're going to be purchasing a different piece of equipment, a different guitar from a new vendor. People have been requesting guitars from Fender. So Fender is going to be our new vendor. So we're going to be putting in Fender, I think that's how you spell it. And then we're going to say tab. That's going to be our new vendor. We don't have them yet, so therefore they're going to ask for the details. We're just going to keep the name in this case. Note that if it was one of our major vendors, we probably would want the details such as the contact information and, that kind of information in there. But I'm just going to save it here for now. We're going to say save. And if we had the email address, then we could obviously just send the purchase order by email. Then we have our information we've seen in prior presentations down below. We're going to put the date as of the 9th. So I'm going to select the date, and I'm just going to select the plus button on the keyboard, and that allows us to kind of go up a few days there to the February 9th. Then we're going to be in the product or the item detail, not the category detail down below. We're going to put in the guitar that we want to purchase. I'm going to abbreviate it for now as an SQ, and then we're going to set up this item as we create the purchase order. So we're going to add that. I'm going to say tab. It's going to say, hey, do you want to add the purchase item? I'm paraphrasing here. We're going to say, yes, it will be an inventory item. So we want an inventory item because it's an actual piece that's in a guitar that we're buying. And then I'm actually going to rename it up top. I'm going to call it a Squire. And then I'm going to call for the SKU, the SQ. And then I'm going to keep the category, no category. I'm going to scroll down to the amount on hand. This is a required field, but you always want it to basically be 0. You don't want to be adding, when you add a new item, any item on hand, typically, unless it's the first day of operations. So we're going to say 0 as of, and we're going to say, I'm just going to put any date here would typically work. So I'm going to put the first date of the operations then, January 1st. Again, it's going to be 0, so I'll put it as of January 1st. I'm not going to put a reorder point at this time. So then we have the inventory. The investment asset account or the inventory asset account is by default to the inventory asset. So when we purchase it, not with this form, but when we get the bill, then we'll put it on the books as an inventory asset. The description, once again, is going to be the Squire. So I'm going to say SQUIRE. Is that how you spell it? SQUIER, I think. Something like that. And then we're going to say the sales price is going to be $244. So we'll say sales price $244. Then the income account will be the income account for product income as opposed to the service income account. And then we have the sales tax. It is taxable standard rate. So we're going to keep it taxable standard rate there. The purchase description is going to be the Squire again. That's going to be the purchase description. And then the cost is going to be $168. So we're going to pay $168 for it. And the cost of goods sold is going to be the expense account. In other words, that's the account that will be affected when we create an invoice or a purchase or a sales receipt to actually sell this piece of equipment. Then the vendor that we buy this from is going to be the new vendor we put in there, which is Fender. Fender is our new vendor. So we're going to say Fender. All right. Then we're going to say save and close. There's our item is set up. Save and close. See if it populates. There's the Squire and the Squire. So there we have that. And then the quantity we're going to say is 1. Now we're also going to add a customer. Remember that the customer field is optional. So when we think about this, if you think about the story of this, if I go back to kind of the flow chart, what's happening here, we're imagining someone comes into the store, they're checking things out, and they're saying, hey, you got a lot of nice guitars. I would like a Squier Fender guitar. And we'd say, I don't know, we haven't ordered from Fender before. That would be a new vendor for us. But we can try to do that. We can order you the Squier guitar. Therefore, we're going to make a purchase order. This goes to the vendor who doesn't care about the customer, but we care. We want to tie that purchase order to the customer so that when we fulfill that order, when we get the guitar, we're then going to turn around and give it to the customer. So once we receive the guitar over here, we'll be able to populate this information with the purchase order to pay for the guitar, and we'll also be able to know and recognize the fact that we need to turn around and create either an invoice or a sales receipt to sell this guitar, given the fact that we purchased it specifically for a particular customer. That customer then is going to be here. That customer is going to be New Music Stuff. A very interesting name. And we're going to say tab. Now this is a customer field. Again, we would probably want their contact information and so on and so forth, but I'm just going to keep it at just the name for the purposes of our practice problem. So there we have it. That's going to be our purchase order. There's no transaction, no effect on the financial statements. We're not going to go to the financial statements because nothing's going to happen there. What will happen is we'll receive the guitar later if everything goes smoothly, and we will then record it on with a bill or with a payment form, like an expense form. So that's what we'll do. We're going to say save and close, and there we have it. Now we're going to repeat the process again, this time to a vendor we have already set up. So we're going to say new. We're going to say that we want to go to the money going out. We want to send a purchase order, which is just going to be called a purchase order when we open up the form. This is going to go to our major vendor, that being Epiphone. So I'm going to select the drop down and be purchasing another guitar from Epiphone this time. So there it is, Epiphone. That's the one we want. We're going to keep the date as of the 9th. If I scroll then down, we're in the item detail, and you'll note it's already populated. There's already something there because it's memorizing the last transaction we had. So QuickBooks is trying to help us out and say, hey, last time with this particular vendor, you ordered up the Epiphone Les Paul. Would you like to do that again? We're going to say yes, and then we're just going to basically change what we need to change. I'm not going to buy one of these. This is like our main guitar, so we're going to get 3 of them. We're going to take 3 of those this time. At $400, that's going to be for the total amount of $1,200. So that's going to be the amount. Again, notice there's numbers here, but there's no numbers that are going to affect the financial statement because we haven't yet paid for it. We haven't yet received it. This is just a request form that we will tie out to the bill we expect to receive in the future. So let's save and close that one. So we're going to say save and close. If we want to take a look at those purchase orders, we can go to the Expenses tab. So on the left-hand side in the Expenses tab, then if we go to the first tab, we will see the Expense Transactions, which of course will include the purchase order. So we have the 2 purchase orders we have made here, and we have the options on the left in terms of the actions. Going back up top, if we were to select a vendor and think about one of these vendors, for example, the new vendor, let's take a look at, which is Fender. And so if we go into Fender, the new vendor, and I'm going to close the hamburger because it's easier to see stuff when we go in there. And so there we have it. So there's the purchase order detail within that particular vendor as well.